She trembled on the cold metal floor, her once magnificent wings reduced to ragged stumps. Her clan called her useless, unworthy of the skies. But when a human extended a gentle hand, she saw something no one else ever offered: the chance to rise higher than any star. She remembered the first moment the blades touched her wings, the icy slice through her delicate membranes, the tearing of her feathers, and the sound of her own screams echoing in the sterile chamber. For her people, the wings were everything, a symbol of status, freedom, power. Without them, she was nothing but a crawling creature, a disgrace. They tossed her aside like broken machinery, left her on the outskirts of the settlement to die among the drifting ash and the echoes of wind. She pressed her face into the dirt that first night, sobbing so violently that her body shook for hours. Each breath felt heavy, filled with shame, regret, and a raw ache that made her chest seize. She remembered her mother's voice, soft, melodic, always saying she would soar above them all one day. Those words now mocked her like a cruel ghost. As dawn rose the next day, she found herself too weak to even stand. Her muscles had grown weak from the lack of food and warmth, and her spirit felt even frailer. Once, she had been graceful, dancing through the sky in a whirl of blue and silver, leaving trails of stardust in her wake. Now she crawled like an insect, pulling herself across the dust with clawed hands, each movement sending jolts of pain through her stubs. Her reflection in a pool of rainwater startled her. Her blue skin, once luminous, had turned sallow, and her bright eyes had dulled into empty orbs of gray. The scars across her back looked like gaping mouths, whispering all her failures back at her. She curled in on herself and wished for the final breath to come swiftly. She did not notice the figure watching from a distance at first. The human had arrived on her world to trade supplies and observe the alien settlements. He had heard rumors of the fallen one, the wingless girl left to die, but he hadn't imagined he would find her so pitifully alone. He watched as she struggled to pull a tattered blanket over her trembling body, her thin fingers working as though every motion was an unbearable weight. He took cautious steps forward, trying not to startle her. She sensed him before he spoke, flinching violently and scuttling backward, her clawed feet scraping against the ground. Her lips curled back in a snarl, revealing sharp, chipped teeth. She hissed at him, a wounded animal defending her last shred of dignity. But he didn't raise a weapon or shout. Instead, he knelt down slowly, keeping his hands open and low. She watched him, her breath ragged, expecting the same cruelty she had known all her life. But the human's eyes weren't filled with disgust or mockery. They carried a warmth she had never seen before, something gentle and deeply steady. He spoke in a voice that sounded like soft rain, telling her he meant no harm. She did not believe him at first. She refused the water he offered, shoving the bottle away so hard it splashed into the mud. But he did not leave. Instead, he sat near her, setting down a small fire starter and a packet of nutrient bars. He kept his distance, but he stayed, and that simple act confused her more than any words could. She stared at the flickering fire he built, mesmerized by its warmth. Her hands twitched as if she wanted to touch it but was too frightened. The human moved aside, allowing her to inch closer on her own. Eventually, the hunger clawing inside her overcame her fear. She grabbed one of the bars and tore into it like a starving beast. The human didn't flinch at her snarling or the mess she made, he simply watched, making sure she wouldn't choke. She almost hated him for that kindness. It made her feel so small, so vulnerable, as if every wall she had built around herself was shattering under his gaze. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked like dry leaves. She demanded to know why he stayed, why he bothered with someone so broken, someone who couldn't even walk upright without wings to balance her. He looked at her and said softly that wings were not what made her worthy. His words felt like a knife and a salve at the same time. She wanted to spit at him, to shove him away, but her body was too weak and her heart too tired. That night, she lay near the warmth of his fire. Every so often, she would glance at him, her sharp eyes narrowing as though she expected him to strike her the moment she closed her eyes. But he only watched the stars above, humming softly to himself. The sound reminded her of the sky. It hurt and comforted her at once. When dawn broke, she found him still there, still awake, guarding her from the predators that prowled the ash dunes. A strange guilt churned inside her. No one had ever stayed for her before. Her clan had abandoned her the second she was deemed unfit, and yet this human, a stranger from the stars, chose to remain. Over the next few days, he returned to her each morning, bringing food and supplies. He began to clean her wounds carefully, wrapping her stubs with antiseptic gauze despite her hisses of pain and outrage. Every time she struck out at him, he patiently waited, never raising his voice or his hand. Slowly, she began to allow his touch. When he brought her a mirror, she looked at herself properly for the first time since her mutilation. She saw the scars, the mud, the once brilliant feathers now gone forever. But she also saw the faint glow in her skin returning, the blue deepening like an ocean at twilight. She almost didn't recognize herself, she almost looked alive. One evening, after a particularly harsh sandstorm, she broke down. She crawled to him and pressed her forehead against his knee, sobbing uncontrollably. Her claws dug into the dirt, her voice a rasping wail of grief and loneliness.
He didn't push her away.
He simply wrapped his arms around her and held her tight. For the first time since she fell from the sky, she felt safe. In the days that followed, he began to teach her things she never thought she'd need: how to balance on 2 feet without wings, how to strengthen her legs, how to use her arms for climbing and running. At first, she resisted, convinced it was pointless. But he encouraged her with each tiny step, each small victory. He would smile at her progress, call her strong, and she found herself craving those smiles more than anything. The hardest part came when he offered to show her the cliffs beyond the dunes, the place where birds and flying creatures gathered. She trembled at the thought, her phantom wings twitching in pain at the memory. But he promised to be at her side, no matter how far she fell or how many times she stumbled. One morning, she stood at the edge of that cliff, wind whipping against her face. The human stood beside her, his hand firm on her shoulder. She took a deep breath, feeling the phantom itch where her wings had once sprouted. For a moment, she felt weightless, the same feeling she once had when the sky belonged to her. She took a running step forward, her claws digging into the rocks, her heart pounding like a storm. And then she leapt, not to fly, but to soar in a new way. She crashed into the sand below, coughing and laughing all at once. He raced down after her, scooping her into his arms, his laughter mingling with hers. That day, she didn't need her wings. She felt alive, felt strong, felt more than she ever had under the gaze of her people. In his arms, covered in dirt and sweat, she realized she had found something greater than the sky. She had found someone who taught her to rise beyond any storm. And though her wings would never return, she knew she would keep learning to soar, one step at a time, with him always beside her. When the human carried her back up the cliff that day, she couldn't stop laughing, a sound she hadn't made since her wings were stolen. Each giggle tumbled from her lips like starlight, echoing across the rocks and surprising even herself. He set her down gently at the top, his own face flushed from the climb and the joy of seeing her free, even if only for a moment. She clutched at his sleeve, her claws trembling, and whispered in a voice so small it nearly vanished in the wind. Why do you stay? I have no wings, no worth. I am nothing." He dropped to one knee before her, his hand cupping her scarred cheek. His eyes held no pity, only fierce warmth, the kind that felt like sunlight after 1,000 cold nights. "You're not nothing," he told her, voice steady as a mountain. "You're stronger than you know. You learned to stand without your wings, you dared to leap, you dared to live. That's more than most can ever say." Her breath shuddered, and tears spilled down her face, streaking across her blue skin. She hated how weak she looked, but his thumb brushed each tear away with gentle certainty. "For so long, I thought the sky was the only place I belonged," she confessed, her claws curling against her chest. "When they took it from me, I thought I died." He smiled, a soft, slow curve that lit his entire face. "The sky isn't just above us. It's in here," he said, tapping gently against her chest. "And you still have it." Those words pierced her deeper than any blade. She remembered the endless dark she had been left in, the way the stars seemed to mock her from above while her clan spat on her name. She remembered the first time he brought her food, the first firelight, the first time she felt his arms steadying her shaking form. "You taught me to fly again," she whispered. He shook his head, resting his forehead against hers. "No. You taught yourself. I only stood beside you." They stayed like that for a long while, their breathing slow, in sync with the drifting winds. Her heart felt heavy and light all at once, as though the pieces she thought were lost forever had begun to glow inside her again. Days turned into weeks. Each dawn, they rose together. He taught her to climb the cliffs without fear, to leap across stone ledges, to balance her body against the sharp gusts of alien wind. At night, they sat under the stars she once hated, now seeing them as friends. She began to laugh more. She began to sing again, a soft, chiming language of her people that once echoed across the highest clouds. Each note trembled at first, but he would listen intently, urging her on with every patient nod. Eventually, she no longer looked at the stubs on her back with pure pain. She still missed her wings, and always would, but she no longer let that grief chain her to the ground. Her steps grew confident. Her claws found strength in the rock. One evening, as they sat by the fire, he pulled something from his pack, a thin band made from woven vines and shimmering minerals. She tilted her head in confusion. He lifted it carefully, voice low. "Where I come from, when you find someone who changes your life, someone you choose to stand beside forever, you give them something like this. Her eyes widened, her breath catching as the flames danced in the reflection of her tears. Do you choose me? She asked, her voice barely more than a breeze.
He nodded. Always.
If you'll choose me too. She lunged forward, claws closing around his hands, her forehead pressing to his. She didn't have words. She only had the fierce trembling warmth in her chest, the sky reborn inside her. In that moment, she didn't need wings to fly. She felt her heart lift above every star, above every cruel word, above every scar. They spent the rest of the night wrapped together, her blue skin glowing faintly in the firelight. He traced the scars on her back, not with disgust but with reverence, as though each one was proof of her unbreakable spirit. The next morning, they walked away from the cliffs together, not as a human and a broken alien, but as two souls who had chosen each other, rebuilt each other. And when she looked up at the sunrise, she realized she had finally found her sky again. Not in the air, but in his arms, in each step forward, in each shared breath. No longer broken. No longer banished. She had learned to soar, higher than she ever dared to dream.